Have you been hearing about the new schools bill? This is a new bill that's passing through the House of Lords at the moment to do with the education of our children. Whether your kids are in school or they are being home educated, there are implications. Now, there's a lot of fear on social media right now about what this could mean for us as homeschoolers. And so today I want to clear that up about what this bill actually says and what we just don't know yet. We're going to talk about who this applies to, who it doesn't, and what you can do if you're not happy about these changes. Okay, let's get into it.
This is Raising Mums, the podcast that raises up Muslim mums like you so that you can raise your children well. And here's your host, Dr. Gemma.
Should you be worried about the new schools bill? Yes. Should you be panicking? No. This bill is still not in place yet. It is not law yet. It is still going through the House of Lords. After that, it has to go through the House of Commons. And then the local authorities have to put all the systems in place to actually implement this. So it's still a long way down the line before this actually comes into place. But it's important to know what the schools bill is so that you can voice your concerns, so that things can get changed when it goes through the House of Commons, so that your MPs know that you're not happy with these changes. Because as they say, knowledge is power, and it is important as home educators that we empower ourselves with this knowledge. So it looks like things are changing here in the UK for home educators. Actually, let me be specific. Things are changing for those of you who are in England. If you're in Scotland and if you are in Wales, at the moment, it looks like things will continue as they always have. So that means that previous to this point, homeschoolers here in the UK enjoyed a lot of freedom. We could homeschool however we liked. We didn't have to tell anybody we were going to do it. And depending on your local authority, you probably have enjoyed a lot of privacy. Well, it looks like things might be turning on that if you are living in England. This new school bill that is being passed as we speak is requiring that all people who have chosen to educate their children at home have to be put on a register. And the reason why they are making these changes is apparently because they want to make sure that every child is receiving a quote-unquote suitable education. They also are suggesting that this is to do with safeguarding and making sure that no children are being abused or are under any kind of situation at home that the authorities are not aware of. Now that all sounds fine on the surface. There's no home educator, there's no human being in the world who isn't going to agree that it's important that we protect children. But what homeschoolers have a problem with is that these measures don't actually do that. But we'll get into that in a minute. For now, let's just get really practical. What this is going to mean, you will have to put your child's name on some kind of register to let your local authority know that you have chosen to home educate them. If you are in Scotland or if you are in Wales, at present, that is not something that's going to happen, but it could happen in the future. Once they have set up the system here in England, it may well spread to you, especially Wales, because Wales, you guys in Wales are under the same banner of the Department of Education. In Scotland, you have your own education minister, you have your own system in place, but that doesn't mean it won't spread to you. But for right now, this is for those of you who are in England. So in an effort to try and understand what's going on, I have read through the bill, and I can tell you it's not an easy thing to read. And, you know, if I have made mistakes in what I'm about to say, feel free to email me and correct me. But I've done my best to try and work out all the legal jargon that is in this bill. And what it looks like is local authority will have to collect information, basic information on the parents' names, the address, the names and ages of the children who are being home educated. And then they have to collect information on how education is being provided. Now, this is the part that a lot of homeschoolers are freaked out by. What does that mean? Well, they haven't made it clear. They haven't made it clear to us as parents, and they haven't made it clear to the local authority. It's also worth pointing out that at present, as of the 14th of June, this bill does not give local authorities the authority to assess the education. So what they can do is they can come in and say, yes, an education is being provided, or no, this child is not being educated, but they cannot assess that education. The other critical thing about all of these changes is now that the local authority can use the school attendance order if you don't register. So, if kids are in school at the moment here in the UK and they don't come to school, the parents can get fined. Well, the same thing is now going to apply to home educators who do not register. If your child has never been in school and you do not register them, you can be fined up to £1,000. If you register your child in a school and they just don't turn up, you can be fined up to £2,500. This, I guess, is their way of making sure that everybody puts their children's name on a register. But what it also does is it makes home educators feel like criminals. If our children are not registered and put on this list, then we can be prosecuted and potentially convicted of a crime. Now, whilst the bill does scatter in words about supporting home educators, the general tone is actually that home educators are a problem that needs to be controlled, and these are the measures they are going to use to control us. It certainly doesn't read as being something that is trying to support us. And whilst they mention, supporting home educators is going to be something that the local authorities now have to do, they don't mention any specifics at all. It's very vague. Things like how the local authority will have to provide advice and information on how to get assistance and how to get access to services for further assistance. These are very vague general terms, and there's nothing specific on how the local authorities are actually going to support home educators in a very tangible way. And again, this is going to be very dependent on each local authority, on how they feel they want to support the home educating families in their area and how they do not. So we're going to just pause for a quick break and a message from Pei, who is one of the students inside my online homeschooling course, Launch Your Homeschool.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Pei and my kids are 2, 4, and 5. I actually learned about Launch Your Homeschool around 2 years ago, and immediately I enrolled as a student. I had no idea on how to go about homeschooling, and after enrolling, I benefited a lot from Dr. Gemma. I was actually following her in Instagram, YouTube, and her blogs, so I knew that it was worth the investment, and it certainly was. It was very, very detailed and yet straight to the point, and I really like that because I didn't have much time to study about it. She included not only aspects of homeschooling but also some home management and parenting strategies that are very, very beneficial in our journey. Aside from that, I really love the active community that she has built, and we continue to learn from her new master classes that she adds to her course. I got tons of values because even after 2 years of enrolling and investing, I still benefit and revisit the module several times.
If you're interested in finding out more about Launch Your Homeschool, enrollment is opening up again at the end of July, so put your name on the waiting list. Just go to launchyourhomeschool.com. If this bill is passed, another important freedom that this is taking away from parents is that you cannot just take your child out of school. In the past, if something happened in school that you were not happy about, bullying, something really dramatic happened, and you would no longer wanted to send your child to that school, you could pull them out the next day and say, this child is not coming to this school anymore, we will educate them at home. This bill will not allow that to happen. Now you are required to follow very specific protocols. If you do not, you potentially could be prosecuted. And this is a huge deal, not just to those of us who home educate, but to every parent who sends their child to school. This right has been taken away from us. What this bill does not give local authorities the right to is to, as I mentioned, assess education. They also cannot monitor you unless there is a specific issue where there is a safeguarding issue. But the actual local authorities to do with education cannot monitor you, and they do not have the power to enter your home and see your children. So that has not changed. And there's a lot of fear going on social media about that. But as of the 14th of June, that is not on the table, okay? What the mandatory register permits is just the collecting of information. No one is going to have the right to come into your home and see your children. No one is going to monitor you, and no one is going to assess education as of yet. But what many, many home educators are concerned about is that this registration is going to lead to that in the future. And honestly, we have no information about that. We don't know if that is what the government's agenda is or not. And I think it's really important to know what this bill does and does not allow from your local authorities, because there are many stories, especially if you go on Facebook, about certain local authorities really overstepping what is expected of their roles, even before this bill, of harassing home educating families and causing unnecessary distress. And those families who are in those areas are very concerned now that these local authorities now have even more power and will potentially abuse those powers. This new bill quotes that between 2019 and 2020, the number of home educating families rose by 38%. And rather than taking that as a sign that something might be wrong with mainstream education, or looking at what this indicates with failures in school or with curriculum, or how schools are not meeting the needs of so many children, rather than taking that route, or asking the hard questions about the massive failures in meeting the needs of special educational needs kids, or why so many teachers are leaving the profession, this bill is seeking to control that rise, to prevent that rise by very restrictive and invasive measures on the privacy of home educating families. So I hope this gives you an idea of where we're at right now with regards to the facts of what this bill actually says and what it doesn't. And what you may be reading on social media is mere speculation, and what the actual facts are. Now, there are still some dates in June where the House of Lords are going to meet to discuss various amendments to this, so things could change. And once we have a clear idea of exactly what's going to happen going forward, then I would like to do another episode about this to support the other home educating families here in England. So what can you do about this? If you're not happy with what you've heard right now, what can you do? Well, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, taught us what to do when you see a wrong happening. First of all, you try and change it with your hands. Secondly, you try and change it with your tongue. You say something. And lastly, if you can't do them, then you feel it in your heart. And so that is what you can do today. You know, there are petitions out there, all over the web, which are, whichever constituency you are in, there is somebody who holds that petition that you can sign, and that will be given to your local MP to oppose this and oppose the changes. So seek that out. The best way to find this is to go onto Facebook and search New Schools Bill petition and then write your constituency name in there. Spread the word. through your voice, through social media, through your WhatsApp groups, whatever, to let people know. Maybe you want to send them this podcast link to tell them, look, this is what is happening, and we should do something about that. And that can be done again through contacting your MP or signing that petition. And finally, just feel it in your heart that this is wrong. This is taking away our rights as parents, our rights to privacy, and make dua, pray that there is justice. And that brings me on to finally how to handle this. The world's, it's every day it feels like something else is happening, something else to affect your mood and bring you down and make you worried and stressed about the future. You can really fall into that trap of despair. And something that brings me a lot of comfort is considering and thinking about the qadr of Allah. In other words, everything is destined. So the Prophet, peace be upon him, he taught us in his hadith that whatever has come to you would never have missed you. And whatever has missed you would never have come to you. In another hadith, he says, if they were to gather together to harm you with anything, they would not harm you except with what Allah had already prescribed against you. In other words, my dear sisters, if this bill is written to come into effect, or whatever stress and worry you have, it's going to come into effect because Allah willed it to happen. And likewise, no matter what the politicians push for, whatever their agenda, no matter how hard they strive to do this, if Allah had not willed it, it's not ever going to happen. And I hope that brings you a sense of calm, that this is out of our hands. We do what we can, we raise our voices, we raise our hands in prayer, and then we trust in the will, in the decree of Allah. There is so much that I could say on this. There are so many more things that I have an opinion on and that I want to voice, but I want to keep this short and sweet and tell you what you really need to know. And I hope that's helped to simplify things for you and to make clear what this bill does and does not say. So right now, what do you need to know? Does this bill make homeschooling illegal? No, it's still a legal, valid way to educate your children. Does this bill mean that you shouldn't homeschool in the future? No, it does not. If you had plans to home educate, go for it. This is not going to prevent you from doing that. Do you need to start now collecting information and recording all the things you do with your kids at home? No. This is not come into effect yet. It is not going to come into effect for a while. So you don't need to start panicking now and collecting all the evidence you have at home of what you're doing with your kids. The key is, don't panic. We're not anywhere near that point yet. This is just in the House of Lords. It still has to go through the House of Commons. And then your local authorities have to work out what to do with it and actually implement it. So whatever you're doing right now, keep going. Keep educating your children at home in a way that aligns with your values. Keep allowing your children to thrive at home in that nurturing, safe environment that you are providing for them. Keep giving them loads of free time to pursue their own interests and their own passions. Continue to give your children that slow and easy childhood, free from pressure and the stress of exams and all the things that come with mainstream education. Keep going and don't panic. So thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you found it useful, share it with your friends, share it with anybody who needs to know this information. Like I said, there's a lot of fear on social media right now, a lot of speculation, and the facts are getting lost in there. Share this out with those who need to know it. Thank you so much for joining me here today. Have a beautiful week, everyone. Assalamu alaikum.